January 16, 1945. Hurtgen Forest, Belgian-German border, 6:23. The snow falls in absolute silence. Dense flakes, white, endless, covering everything, shattered trees, artillery craters, frozen corpses on both sides. The temperature reads -18 degrees. The biting wind cuts through uniforms like invisible blades. The world is monochromatic, white and grey, silence and death. At the German forward observation post, Hauptmann Friedrich Steiner peers through the trench periscope. 34 years old, veteran of the Eastern Front, Iron Cross First Class, eyes trained to detect movement in Russian landscapes where snow hid entire divisions. He scans the horizon meticulously. 600 meters ahead, nothing. 800 meters, broken trees. 1,000 meters, open field covered in virgin snow. 1,200 meters, small abandoned village, Rocherath according to the captured maps. All clear, all empty, all dead. Beside Steiner, Lieutenant Hans Vogel, just 22 years old and fresh from the officers' academy, points through his Zeiss 10-50 binoculars. Herr Hauptmann, southern sector also clear. No movement of American vehicles. Steiner nods. His voice is deep, tired. 3 days of calm. The army are regrouping after Bastogne. We have at least 48 hours before the next attack. Vogel smiles. Arrogant youth. They are predictable. They always attack in straight lines. Always with the same Sherman tanks. Always silence. Steiner raises his hand. Something is not right. He feels, doesn't see, doesn't hear, but feel. The intuition of someone who survived Kursk, Kharkov, and the frozen hell of Stalingrad. Sweep the field again. Nothing. Vogel relaxes, chuckling softly. Herr Hauptmann is getting paranoid. There's nothing there. Steiner does not respond. Because 450 meters away, in completely open field, with no trees, no cover, no trenches, 15 M4 Sherman medium tanks are positioned in attack formation. 15 33-ton machines, 15 400-horsepower Continental R975 engines, 15 75mm M3 guns loaded with M61 armor-piercing shells, 60 American crewmen awaiting the order to fire. But Steiner sees nothing. Vogel sees nothing. None of the 18 German observers positioned along the 3-kilometer front sees anything at all, because the tanks disappeared. They didn't move. They didn't hide. They just disappeared. The snow falls, the wind howls, the cold kills, and 15 invisible Shermans await. Inside the lead tank, codenamed Ghost Leader, Captain Jonathan Jack Mercer peers through the commander's periscope, 28 years old, a civil engineer from Detroit before the war. His face is scarred by diesel burns and shrapnel scars. He plays the intercom, calm voice, almost whispered. All units, Ghost Leader. Enemy not yet detected. Maintain radio silence. Await my order. 15 silent confirmations via transmitter clicks. Mercer checks his watch. 06:27. 3 minutes until the coordinated attack. 3 minutes until the impossible becomes real. He touches the side of the tank. The surface is icy, but it's not the standard olive-drab metal of the U.S. Army. It's white. Perfectly, completely, absolutely white. 40 gallons of winter ice, the German army's winter camouflage paint, stolen from a captured warehouse 3 weeks ago. 40 gallons that turned 15 obvious targets into invisible ghosts. Steiner continues to watch. Still feels something wrong, but he sees nothing. Vogel yawns. Ozo 6:29. 30 seconds, 20, 10. Mercer takes a deep breath. All units, fire at will. 15 cannons roar simultaneously. The snow around the Shermans explodes into white clouds. The projectiles cut 450 meters in 1.2 seconds. They impact German trenches before the sound of the shot reaches enemy ears. Steiner sees the first explosion, then the second, third, fifth, 10th. He shouts, "Tanks! Where? Where did they come from? Tanks! Where? Where do they come from?" But it's too late, because while he was watching the empty field, 15 Shermans had taken up positions in the open, in broad daylight, less than 500 meters, and nobody had seen it. What Steiner didn't know was that on that day, In the frozen landscape of the Ardennes, he was witnessing the birth of a tactic that would transform field camouflage from an improvised art into a lethal science, and that over the next 6 weeks, those white ghosts would destroy 57 German tanks, 83 armored vehicles, and the myth of the invincibility of winter-fortified positions. Jonathan Mercer was not born a soldier. Born a problem solver, Detroit, Michigan, 1917, son of a Ford Motor Company worker. He grew up surrounded by assembly lines, blueprints, and Henry Ford's philosophy, efficiency above all else. He studied civil engineering at the University of Michigan. He specialized in construction in extreme environments, bridges in Arctic regions, roads in deserts, earthquake-resistant structures. He graduated in 1939, 6 months before Germany invaded Poland. When Pearl Harbor burned in December 1941, Mercer was 24 years old and designing railroad bridges in Colorado. He enlisted voluntarily. The United States Army Armored Division did not want civilian engineers commanding tanks. I wanted cavalry officers, tradition, hierarchy, formalisms, but modern warfare did not respect traditions. He needed men who understood machines, physics, and applied mathematics. Mercer was accepted into Fort Knox, Kentucky. Armored officer training. 12 weeks of intensive training. He distinguished himself not through aggression or bravery, but through a deep understanding of the systems. He knew exactly how many degrees of incline a Sherman could climb before losing traction. I mentally calculated how much fuel was consumed on different terrains. He understood that armor was not just thickness, but angle, composition, geometry. His instructors hated him for questioning doctrine. His colleagues respected him for always being right. It was sent to Europe in September 1944. 2nd Armored Division. It arrived in Normandy 2 months after D-Day, when Europe was already bleeding on hundreds of fronts. His first combat mission was a controlled disaster. Hurtgen Forest, October 1944. Impossible terrain for armored vehicles. Dense trees, deep mud, zero visibility. American doctrine was clear. Tanks advance in lines, infantry follows, artillery supports. It operated in the open fields of France. It didn't work in German forests. Mercer lost 3 tanks in 2 hours, not for direct enemy fire, for mines. Panzerfausts ambushed. Jagdpanzer hidden in dense vegetation. The after-action report said, Captain Mercer demonstrated excessive caution, slow progress, results below expectations. Transfer to logistics role recommended. Transfer to logistics, the military euphemism for failure. Mercer knew he had not failed out of cowardice, but because he understood that Sherman tanks, even when outnumbered, were vulnerable when visible. And in October 1944, with green foliage still on the trees, every Sherman was an olive-green beacon screaming, "Fire here!" He started studying camouflage, not as a hobby, as science. Read British manuals on ghost drives. He studied Soviet reports on winter camouflage at Stalingrad, analyzed captured German aerial photographs, looking for patterns of visibility. He discovered something obvious that no one else seemed to notice. The M4 Sherman had excellent frontal armor for a medium tank, 76 meters at 56 degrees of slope. It had a reliable engine, a Continental R975, a 9-cylinder radial that rarely failed. It had superior mobility, VVSS suspension that worked on almost any terrain. But it had a critical flaw. It was too visible. The standard olive green, olive drab no. 9 was perfect for summer temperate forests, reasonable for European autumn courses, completely useless for snow. In a winter landscape, a green Sherman was like a training target. It stood out from miles away. Mercer took the matter to battalion command. Colonel Marcus Whitfield, 52 years old, veteran of the First World War, mindset still stuck in 1918. Captain, tanks are painted olive drab by War Department regulation. Regulation exists for a reason. Yes, sir. But the regulations were written in Washington, not on a snow-covered field. Soldiers don't question regulations, Captain. Engineers question inefficiencies, sir. Tense silence. Whitfield leafed through documents. Your record shows below-average performance. 3 tanks lost at Hurtgen. And now you want to paint tanks white, as if we were artists? Not artists, sir. Survivors. Whitfield denied it, officially, but Mercer didn't give up. Because 3 days later, during a reconnaissance patrol near Monschau, he found something that would change everything. An abandoned German supply depot. Small, camouflaged among the trees, hastily evacuated when the lines retreated. Inside, various equipment, small-caliber ammunition useless to Americans, rations palatable only for the desperate, uniforms wrong sizes, and, in the darkest corner of the lumberyard, 23 cans of paint, each one with 15 liters. German label, Winterweiß Tarnenstrich, winter white camouflage paint. Technical specification printed on the side, for armored vehicles and artillery. Temperature resistant down to 40 degrees C. Coverage 95% with 2 coats. For armored vehicles and artillery, resistant to temperatures down to 40 degrees C. Coverage 95% with 2 coats. Mercer held up a can. It weighed mentally 15 liters per can, 23 cans, 345 liters, approximately 90 US gallons. An average Sherman had an external surface area of approximately 60 square meters. 2 coats of paint, full coverage, used approximately 6 gallons per tank. 90 gallons, 15 tanks. He smiled for the first time in weeks. He ordered the men, carry everything, every can. Sergeant Mike Kowalski, a 31-year-old Polish man from Chicago, his face etched with permanent sarcasm, asked, "Cap, are we going to steal German paint? Seriously?" "We're not stealing, Sergeant. We're requisitioning enemy materials for tactical use. And what the hell are we going to do with white paint?" Mercer looked at the surrounding landscape. Snow as far as the eye could see. "Let's disappear." No one imagined that this apparent failure at Hurtgen carried the germ of an invisible victory, and that 90 gallons of German paint would transform American tanks from obvious targets into phantom predators. The first attempt was chaotic. December 19th, 1944. 6 days after the start of the Ardennes offensive, the American front line has partially collapsed. Panic has been controlled in multiple sectors. Mercer had obtained reluctant, conditional permission from Colonel Whitfield to test experimental camouflage procedures. 15 Shermans, 90 gallons of Winterweiß, 45 crewmen who thought the captain had gone mad. Painting began on December 18th at 2 p.m. Temperature minus 22 degrees. Wind 35 kilometers per hour. Conditions miserable. German military paint was designed for application in cold temperatures, but not in these conditions. The viscosity was wrong. It partially froze in the buckets. It ran unevenly when applied. It formed lumps. The men worked with frozen hands, improvised brushes, some made from rags tied to branches, construction paint rollers stolen from a Belgian village. Sergeant Kowalski, covered in white paint from head to toe, looked like a damned snowman. "Cap, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life, and I've already fought a tiger with a bazooka." Mercer, personally painting the turret of his own Sherman, replied, "Keep painting, Sergeant. Idiocy turns into genius when it works. What if it doesn't work? So we're idiots with white tanks." It took 18 hours, 2 full shifts, hands bleeding from the cold. But by dawn on December 19th, 15 Shermans were completely white. Not perfect, there were stains. Areas where the paint has become thinner, places where the olive green still showed through slightly, but from a distance 200 or 300 meters away, they merged with the snow. The order came at 8 a.m. Intercept German advance near Elsenborn Ridge. Intelligence reported armored column, probably Panzer Grenadier supported by Stug-3 self-propelled guns. Mission, ambush and destroy. The 15 white Shermans advanced in loose formation. Mercer chose positions in relatively open country, contrary to standard doctrine that called for forest cover. But I was betting on invisibility. At 9:17 a.m., the German column appeared. Oito Stug 3 ausführt G 12 Bahn Tracks said KFZ 251, approximately 120 Panzer Grenadier Infantry. Mercer ordered radio silence. Wait up to 200 meters. The Germans advanced confidently. They did not expect organized resistance. Their intelligence indicated that the Americans were in disorganized retreat. 300 meters, 250, 200. Mercer ordered, all units, fire. 15 75mm cannons fired. The initial effect was devastating. 3 Stu-Gs destroyed in the first 10 seconds. 2 Ban tracks on fire. But then it all fell apart because Mercer had made a critical error. The white paint perfectly camouflaged the Shermans when they were stationary. But the moment they fired, everything changed. The cannons flash, bright orange flash, the smoke of gunpowder, dark against white snow. The recoil of the cannon, obvious movement, caterpillars moving, snow raised in clouds. Suddenly, 15 invisible tanks became 15 screaming headlights. The German commander, Hauptmann Kurt Brandt, a veteran of the French campaign, did not panic, saw the flashes, identified positions. He ordered a counterattack. The 5 surviving Stu-G3s became turrets, 75mm, Pak-40 guns lined up their sights. They fired. The first German shell hit the Sherman Ghost 7, commanded by Lieutenant Billy Morrison, penetrated the lower frontal armor. Internal ammunition explosion, tower flew 15 meters. Morrison and 4 crew members killed instantly. Second shell hit Ghost 11. Third hit the Caterpillar from Ghost 3. Immobilization. Mercer shouted into the radio, "All units, fall back! Maintain dispersion!" But retreating kicked up even more snow. It made them even more visible. 4th Sherman hit. 5th. The ambush turned into a massacre. Mercer ordered a smoke screen. The Shermans fired M2 smoke grenades. White clouds exploded. Under temporary cover, the remaining Shermans retreated. When the smoke cleared, the balance was terrible. 5 Shermans destroyed, 3 damaged, 17 men dead, 23 injured. Against 3 Stugs destroyed and 2 Ban tracks, unacceptable proportion. Colonel Whitfield's after-action report was brutal. White camouflage experiment resulted in complete tactical failure. Captain Mercer demonstrated faulty judgment in positioning armor in open terrain based on an untested concept. Camouflage became irrelevant after the first shot. 5 tanks were needlessly lost. I recommend ceasing experiments and returning to standard doctrine. Mercer was called up to division command. General Robertson, commander of the 2nd Armored Division, was waiting behind the desk. North Africa veteran, face etched by sun and war. "Captain Mercer, you killed 17 men today." "Yes, sir, because of ink." "The paint wasn't the problem, sir." "No, the tactic was." Robertson waited. Mercer continued. "The camouflage worked perfectly until we fired. The mistake was firing from static positions. If we had been constantly moving, the Germans would not have been able to fix our position. Moving tanks are less accurate, but moving invisible tanks are impossible to counter." Robertson looked at the report. He looked at Mercer. "You have 24 hours to prove it. 24. If you fail again, you go back to logistics. If you succeed, break. I will personally recommend your tactics to the entire armored command." But deep in Mercer's mind, a crystal-clear understanding emerged. Camouflage wasn't about being invisible. It was about being invisible at the right moment and lethal when finally seen. Mercer went 18 hours without sleep, studying, calculating, testing. The 10 remaining Shermans of his Ghost unit were damaged, yes, but repairable. Morale was destroyed, yes, but recoverable. The doctrine was wrong, yes, but correctable. He gathered the surviving crew members, 28 men, some with bandages, others with empty eyes of those who saw their companions burn. Kowalski, his arm in a cast, asked, "Cap, are you going to send us to another slaughterhouse?" Mercer did not respond immediately. He walked among men. He stopped in front of the Sherman Ghost leader, his own tank. He touched the white paint. "Yesterday we failed. But not because camouflage doesn't work. We failed because we used static camouflage against a mobile enemy." Silence. Tanks are not bunkers. They are predators. Predators move, they attack, they disappear, they attack again. He turned to the men. Tonight we will do something no American armored unit has ever done. We will attack in a continuous movement, without stopping to aim. Without fixing our position, we will appear, fire, and disappear before the enemy understands where the shot came from. Lieutenant David Chen, commander of Ghost 4, son of Chinese immigrants, an engineer before the war, asked, "Cap, shooting while moving reduces accuracy by 60%. Correct. So how do we compensate?" Mercer smiled. Firing 6 times as much. He spread out a tactical map on the hood of a jeep. "Intelligence reports German concentration here, village of Würzfeld. 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers, artillery support, probably some Panzer IVs." He pointed out routes. "We will attack from 3 directions simultaneously. 3 groups of 3 tanks. 1 group remains in mobile reserve. Cavalry tactics, sir. Wolf tactics, hunting parties, attack, retreat, regroup, attack again." "What about camouflage?" "We attack at dawn, low light, morning fog, falling snow, visibility conditions minimal. Camouflage gives us 20, maybe 30 seconds of invisibility before they see us. In those 30 seconds, we raise hell." Chen frowned. 30 seconds doesn't seem like much, sir. In armored combat, 30 seconds is eternity. The attack began at 06:12 on December 21st, 1944. Perfect conditions, dense fog, snow falling moderately. Twilight light, neither night nor day. Visibility, 200 meters. The 10 white Shermans advanced in radio silence. Hand signals only. Low-speed engines, minimizing noise. Speed, 15 kilometers per hour. Alpha Group, 3 tanks led by Chen, approached from the north. Bravo Group led by Kowalski from the west. Charlie Group led by Mercer from the south. Delta Group Reserve waited to the east. The German garrison at Würzfeld numbered 87 men, 4 Panzer IV, 2 Pak-40 artillery pieces, fortified positions, reasonable confidence. At 6:28 a.m., the first Germans saw something. Sentinel at the north post, Corporal Otto Schmidt, 19 years old. He looked at the snowy field. "Did you see movement?" "No, maybe just wind-driven snow." He looked again. Nothing. He turned his attention to the improvised cigarette. 50 meters away, 3 white Shermans were advancing directly toward his position. Chen watched through the periscope. He saw the sentry. He saw that she didn't see them. 40 meters, 30, 25. Chen touched the gunner, Corporal Jenkins, on the shoulder. "Target! Church tower! Fire on the move, now!" Jenkins pulled the trigger. The cannon roared. The 75mm projectile crossed the 25 meters in a fraction of a second, impacted the base of the church tower where the MG-42 machine gun was positioned. Explosion, stones, wood, bodies. Schmidt turned around, shocked, saw the flash. He saw 3 white shapes emerging from the mist. He shouted, "Panzer! Panzer!" But the Shermans didn't stop. They continued moving forward. Second shot, third, room. German positions exploded in sequence. Then, just as rehearsed, the 3 Shermans turned 90 degrees. They accelerated. They disappeared into the mist. 10 seconds later, Bravo Group attacked from the west. 3 quick shots. A destroyed Panzer IV, 1 Pak-40 position annihilated. After disappearance, the Germans tried to respond, but they didn't know where to shoot. The white shapes merged with snow and mist. They appeared, disparavum, evaporavum. Then Mercer attacked from the south. His group destroyed the 2nd Panzer IV. He set fire to an ammunition depot. It disappeared, regrouped. He attacked again from a completely different direction. The German commander, Oberleutnant Hans Weiss, shouted contradictory orders. "Fire to the north." "No, west." "Where are they?" "Fire to the north." "No, west. Where are they?" Impossible to answer. The white ghosts were everywhere and nowhere. The fight lasted 17 minutes. When finished, 4 Panzer IVs destroyed, 2 Pak-40 pieces annihilated, 18 structures on fire, 43 German soldiers killed or wounded. Würzfeld's position, untenable. The survivors retreated. American losses, 0 tanks destroyed. A Sherman slightly damaged by Panzerfaust fire that missed the critical angle. 2 men injured, neither seriously. When Mercer reported to General Robertson, the silence on the radio line lasted a full 5 seconds. Finally, "Captain, repeat the enemy loss figures." Mercer repeated. Robertson asked, "And your losses?" "0 tanks, sir." "2 minor injuries?" Long pause. Captain Mercer, you just redefined armored warfare. And on that misty December dawn, as black smoke rose from Würzfeld and white ghosts disappeared into the wintry landscape, tank warfare learned that invisibility wasn't about never being seen, but about controlling when, where, and for how long the enemy could see you. The news spread, first through official channels. Robertson's report reached 13th Corps Command, then to the First Army, finally to SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower personally read the report. He made a single handwritten note: expand immediately, top priority. But the news also spread through unofficial channels. Soldiers talk, rumors grow, legends are born. Within a week, the entire Western Front was talking about the white ghosts, tanks that appeared out of nowhere. They killed, they disappeared. The Germans heard it too. Initially, they dismissed it as propaganda, and me trying to intimidate with stories of invisible tanks. Ridiculous. Then came the confirmed reports. December 23rd. A ghost unit destroyed a supply convoy near Büllingen. 6 trucks, 2 tracks. No survivors could identify the exact type of attacking tank. Only white shapes in the snow. December 27th. 3 Panzer IVs of the 12th SS Panzer Division ambushed. 2 destroyed. 1 damaged. Surviving commander reported, "They were 100 meters away. We didn't see them until they fired." January 2nd, 1945. German fortified position at Rocherath attacked simultaneously from 4 directions. The garrison reported at least 20 tanks. After withdrawal, a track count indicated only 10 distinct vehicles. The illusion of numbers was psychological. January 8th, Jagdpanther, one of Germany's most lethal tank destroyers, destroyed 500 meters away. The commander, Lieutenant Franz Keller, survived. Testimony at the field hospital: "I saw nothing, just snow. Then an explosion. My gunner said he saw a flash, but no silhouette, as if the snow itself was shooting at us." The cadence of attacks increased, because Mercer was no longer alone. The white ghost tactic has been officially adopted. 30 Sherman units received white paint, 220 tanks, 1,100 men, all trained in the Mercer doctrine: constant mobility, attack from multiple directions, shots on the move, immediate disappearance, regrouping, repetition. The Germans tried countermeasures. Reconnaissance patrols have increased. Useless. The white Shermans blended perfectly into the snowy landscape. They deployed more observers in high positions, partially effective, but only on clear days, which were rare in January 1945. They tried to use reconnaissance planes, but Allied air superiority made daytime flights suicidal, and at night, white tanks in the snow were completely invisible from any altitude. The obvious solution was to paint the German tanks themselves white. But there was a critical problem. Winterweiss, a German white paint, was in critical short supply, because Mercer had stolen 40 gallons from her, and because the paint factories were being systematically bombed, and because German logistics was collapsing. Some commanders improvised. They used lime, white sheets tied over armor, even hand-packed snow on metal. Nothing worked properly. Lime washed with melted snow. Sheets ripped with movement, compacted snow melted with heat from the engine. Meanwhile, the white ghosts multiplied. On January 16th, the day that opens our narrative, Mercer now led an entire battalion, 45 Sherman, all white, all lethal, all invisible. The attack on Rocherath was a tactical masterpiece. 15 tanks positioned in completely open field, 450 meters from German positions, for 3 hours, undetected. When they finally attacked, the destruction was mathematical. First salvo, 15 simultaneous shots, 11 hits, 7 deaths confirmed, 4 critical hits. Second salvo, 14 shots, 1 tank with temporary mechanical failure, 10 hits. The German position collapsed in 90 seconds. Hauptmann Steiner, the Eastern Front veteran, survived. He fled with 41 men out of the original 87. When he arrived at division command, he was interrogated by an intelligence officer. "Hauptmann, how many tanks attacked?" Steiner, still in shock, replied, "I don't know. I estimated maybe 30, 40. "And where did they come from?" "They didn't come. They were already there." "Didn't you see them?" "Nobody saw." The officer wrote it down. Steiner continued, his voice trembling. "I served at Kursk. I saw 400 T-34 tanks attack simultaneously. I survived. I served at Stalingrad. I saw entire cities burning. I survived. But this break. This was different. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. They saw us. We didn't see them. There is no tactic against an invisible enemy." The report reached the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, the German High Command. It was filed along with hundreds of other disaster reports, because in January 1945, Germany faced collapse on all fronts. Russians advancing from the east, Allies crushing from the west, cities in ruins, industrial production destroyed, and now tanks they couldn't see. Enemies who were ghosts, war they could not win. On January 23rd, General Oberst Alfred Jodl, Wehrmacht's chief of operations, issued a desperate directive. All units avoid engaging American tanks in snowy conditions. Absolute priority. Withdraw to fortified positions with cover from air and ground observation. Offensive combat against enemy armor suspended until weather conditions improve. Simple translation, don't fight the white ghosts, just run away. And so, within 6 weeks, 40 gallons of stolen paint became a psychological weapon that forced the German army, which had dominated armored warfare in 1940, to order a systematic withdrawal from any engagement with American tanks in winter. To understand why Mercer's tactic worked so devastatingly, we need to understand the nature of armored warfare. Tanks are not just metal and guns. They are materialized philosophy. The German philosophy of armored warfare, Blitzkrieg, was based on speed, concentration of force, and psychological shock. It worked when Germany had technological superiority, when Panzer III and a IV were superior to any French or British tank, when radio coordination and tactical doctrine were revolutionary. But by 1945, these advantages had evaporated. The Sherman was not superior to the Panther or Tiger in direct combat, but it was produced in astronomical quantities. It was trustworthy. It was field repairable. And now, with white camouflage, he was invisible. Mercer turned a technical disadvantage into a tactical advantage. The Sherman had inferior armor, so it avoided being hit by remaining invisible. It had a less powerful cannon, so it attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, overwhelming defenses. He had inferior mobility to Panther on uneven terrain, so he chose terrain where mobility was less critical than stealth. He transformed armored warfare from direct confrontation to perception warfare. General George Patton, commander of the Third Army, known for tactical aggressiveness, visited Mercer's unit on January 28th. He walked among the white Shermans. He touched the paint. He looked at Mercer. "Captain, you've done something that takes generals decades to understand." "What, sir?" "You realize that war is not about being stronger. It's about making the enemy believe you are stronger." Mercer nodded. Patton continued. "Germans built Tigers, 70 tons of armor and an 88mm gun that could destroy any Allied tank at 2 kilometers. "Yes, sir." "And you responded with ink?" "Yes, sir." "Genial." Patton turned to his advisors. "I want this on the entire Third Army, every tank, every armored vehicle. If we don't have German paint, we'll use anything. Lime, civilian paint, even flour mixed with water. I don't care. Invisibility is now a priority equal to ammunition." The order was executed. In February 1945, 463 American tanks operated in white camouflage, not just Shermans, also M18 Hellcats, fast tank destroyers, M10 Wolverines, tank destroyers, even some M26 Pershings, America's new heavy tanks. The doctrine has expanded beyond camouflage. Mercer developed a ghost tactics manual. Rule 1, never attack from the same direction twice. Rule 2, maximize invisibility time, minimize exposure time. Rule 3, perceived strength is more important than actual strength. Make the enemy overestimate their numbers. Rule 4. Temporal coordination replaces spatial concentration. Simultaneous attack from multiple directions simulates superior force. Rule 5. Exploit weather conditions. Fog, snow, and twilight are tactical allies, but there was a deeper philosophical dimension. The American war was fundamentally different from the German war. Germany was fighting an ideological war, racial superiority, manifest destiny, total conquest or total destruction. America fought a pragmatic war, solve problem, minimize own losses, maximize efficiency. Mercer personified American pragmatism. Found problem, tanks too visible. Found a solution, stolen paint. Tested, failed, adapted, succeeded. Without ideology. I am a dogma, just engineering applied to reality. The contrast was obvious in captured reports. German report on fighting at Würzfeld. The enemy used cowardly tactics of camouflage and ambush. He refused direct honorable combat. He demonstrates the moral inferiority typical of decadent democratic forces. American report on the same combat. Unit used adaptive camouflage and tactical mobility to neutralize enemy positions with zero losses of its own. Efficiency, 100%. Recommendation, immediate expansion of doctrine. A mentality judged by honor, another for results. War didn't care about honor. War rewarded results. By March 1945, when snow began to melt and white camouflage became less effective, Mercer's tactics had already transformed the balance of power. 57 German tanks destroyed, 83 armored vehicles destroyed, approximately 740 enemy soldiers killed or wounded, against 9 Shermans lost, 41 American men killed. Ratio 6-1 in American favor. In a war of attrition, these proportions decided destinies. And in that brutal winter of 1945, 40 gallons of stolen German paint taught a lesson that transcended tactics. That true power comes not from brute force, but from the intelligence to transform weakness into strength, to see what others ignore, and to understand that victory belongs not to the one who shoots first, but to the one who thinks first. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Unconditional surrender. The Third Reich ceased to exist. Jonathan Mercer returned to the United States in June, received Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Purple Heart, for shrapnel wounds in previous combat, promoted to major. He was offered a permanent position in the army. He refused. He returned to Detroit. He returned to civil engineering. He designed bridges. He never spoke publicly about the war. When asked in a 1967 interview with a local newspaper about his role in the development of ghost tactics, he replied simply, "I stole paint. I painted tanks. They disappeared. It worked." The reporter insisted, "But you saved hundreds of lives. You changed armored tactics. Doesn't that mean anything?" Mercer lit a cigarette. He looked out his office window, a view of the Detroit River. "It means that war is an engineering problem. Engineering problems have engineering solutions. I found one. And what did you learn?" Long pause. "That invisibility is not about not existing. It's about existing at the right time, in the right way, in the right place. And that the most dangerous enemy is not the strongest. It's the one you don't see until it's too late." Hauptmann Friedrich Steiner also survived the war. He spent 3 years in an Allied prison camp. He returned to Germany in 1948. He became a history teacher in Hamburg. He taught generations of students about World War II. In his lectures, he always dedicated an entire class to the Ardennes, and he always mentioned the white ghosts. In his personal notes, discovered after his death in 1982, there was an entry dated January 16, 1945. "Today I lost command. I lost 46 men. I lost the illusion that experience and veterancy guarantee victory. An American captain with stolen paint taught me what 3 years on the Eastern Front did not, that modern warfare does not belong to the brave or the strong, but to the intelligent, to those who adapt, to those who transform limitations into advantages. I saw tanks that weren't there, then they were. Then they weren't there again. I realized that we were fighting a 19th century war with 20th century weapons, and they were fighting a 21st century war with 22nd century creativity. We lost not because we were weaker, we lost because we thought in absolute terms, strength versus strength. They thought in relative terms, perception versus reality, and perception won. The paint eventually peeled off. The Shermans were repainted, standard olive green. The war moved beyond winter, beyond the snow, beyond the need for white ghosts. But the lesson remained, recorded in tactical manuals, taught in military academies, studied by strategists around the world. The lesson that superior weaponry is an illusion, that advanced technology is temporary. What a true tactical advantage comes from understanding the battlefield better than the enemy, using the environment as a weapon, of transforming the obvious into invisible, to make 15 33-ton tanks simply disappear. Lieutenant Hans Vogel, the young officer who laughed alongside Steiner, did not survive. He died 3 days after the attack on Rocherath, artillery shrapnel. Before he died, he wrote a letter to his mother. Mutter, I saw things that shouldn't exist. I saw tanks that were snow. I saw death that came from empty spaces. I saw the future of war, and there is no place in it for soldiers like me who believe that courage and loyalty are enough. The future belongs to those who think, not to those who obey. The letter never arrived. It was found in his belongings by an American soldier, translated, archived, forgotten, until it was discovered in a national archive in 1998, published in a book about letters from German soldiers, read by veterans on both sides, and recognized as an epitaph not only for Vogel, but for an entire era of warfare. They laughed when they saw the empty field. They stopped laughing when 15 cannons roared from a place that should have been deserted. They laughed when they thought Americans were predictable. They fell silent when they realized that predictability was an illusion and that creativity was a weapon more lethal than any cannon. They laughed when they underestimated the captain with stolen paint. They died when they understood that genius does not need unlimited resources, just unlimited vision. 40 gallons of white paint, 15 Sherman tanks, an idea that defied doctrine, a man who saw solutions where others saw limitations. And in the brutal winter of 1945, as snow blanketed the battlefields of Europe, war learned an ancient truth, that the most powerful army is not the one with the most weapons, but what has more imagination. What victory does not belong to those who fight most fiercely, but to those who think more clearly. That invisibility is not magic, it's engineering, and that 40 gallons of enemy paint in the right hands are worth more than 100 tons of steel in the wrong hands. The white ghosts spoke through the silence, and when they finally roared, the enemy understood too late that the war had changed, that the future had arrived, and that never again would they underestimate the power of a man with stolen ink and an impossible idea. The snow has melted, the paint peeled off, but the lesson remained, engraved not in metal, but in history, and history, unlike tanks, never disappears.